Here we are in A Course of Love, chapter 3 of the third treatise, and the title of this chapter is The True Self. So we just finished in chapter 2, dealing with the mistake that we made in thinking that we had to separate from God in order to represent ourselves individually. So we're moving forward now with the true self. And this poor caricature I chose because it just seemed to speak to me about how we feel about that confusing personal self that we deal with daily. Verse 1 tells us, while your ego has not been lovable, you have always been. Here is where you need to realize that the personal self that is dear to you is not your ego self and never has been. So what this would indicate then is that you've had an incorrect idea about who the personal self is. Now, notice he doesn't say there is no personal self. He doesn't say that you don't have an individual flavor, but just that what you thought, the one that you really love, the flavor that you believe in about yourself, that's not the ego self. Now, if you'll remember back talking about the ego self and what that is. What is the ego self? So the ego self is the one who believes as if that's who you are, believes that you're separate, believes that I'm just this individual animal with some kind of thinking going on, and I was born a certain date and I'm going to die who knows when, but there'll be a time, and I am this character that I am playing in the world. The ego self believes that it is the character, and that's all there is that character. So what he's telling us here is the character you've been playing, that's not your real personal self. Your personal characteristics are a persona that serves the ego, the one who thinks it's that. This is what you thought you made lovable or unlovable. And of course, punished yourself for the things you thought you made unlovable, which was simply a result of your own conditioning, and you're blameless for that. You fear being disappointed by people, by situations, by life, certainly. And you fear disappointing others. You want to live up to what people want from you. You want to be admired and respected and loved. So that's the state the ego is in. And then some people give up trying because they recognize that life is beyond their control. And they're like, yeah, I'm really messed up and I can't seem to control it, so I'm just going to give up. And they go deeply into a substance, or they get sick and leave the game. They do whatever they need to do. Once they give up, they give up. And even those of us who are well-intentioned really aren't surprised by failure. It's like, I really, really want to be a good person. I really want to do this well, but we're not surprised when that doesn't happen. And we really aren't sure what does work. We're still not very good at living this life. We haven't really mastered it yet. But it's happening now. That's why we're here. So, yay! Congratulations! You're getting ready to learn how to live. It is yourself who, more often than not, you blamed for all your misfortune. Boy, isn't this the truth? You have hated your own weakness, your own moods, your own illness or depression. You've hated all of those things about yourself, and hated that you couldn't control them, hated that you couldn't change them. So we've been having this really non-productive relationship with ourselves because of that blaming ourselves and for the fact that we haven't been able to control anything. Verse 5, you thus created a society that reflected this hatred of the self and that functioned on finding blame for every misfortune. I mean, you know that's true. You watch. If something happens in the news, this happened or that happened, immediately you want to find out who's to blame. If an airplane went down, oh my gosh, let's get that black box. Let's find out whose fault this was. While society would seem to have done so much to cause your unhappiness, and while you in turn have blamed it as much as it has blamed you, you never blamed anything quite so much as you blamed yourself. And I think we can all agree with that. Now we must eliminate the vengeful self. You have not fully forgiven yourself. Remember forgiveness. What is forgiveness? Forgiveness is the recognition. It is not saying, yeah, you really screwed up and I'm going to cut you a break. Forgiveness is the recognition that there was nothing really done anyway that you have to worry about. There's no harm done. It's just is what happened, and there is no blame, and it had no effect. Verse 6, you've replaced judgment with forgiveness as a belief, but you continue to fail to recognize your need to replace judgment with forgiveness when it comes to yourself. You've not yet fully realized how much you still consider unlovable about yourself. Until you fully recognize yourself, you cannot fully love yourself. Until you love fully, you do not love in truth. So now we've got an issue here. In order to forgive yourself, you have to become aware of what you consider to be unlovable. And you have to recognize who you actually are. You have to have an experience of connection with the true self in order to love yourself. Because if you're trying to love that character, that flawed character that's a result of all of your conditioning and your experiences, the one that you're representing, if you're trying to love that character, that's not going to happen. That's where self-esteem falls short. When the world talks about confidence and self-esteem, they're trying to get us to love the character. And that's a really hard job, because for most of us, our characters aren't that great. Our characters are flawed because not our fault, but because we've had things happen to us and society has conditioned us, our families conditioned us, our experiences have conditioned us. And as a result, the character responds in ways that aren't always really helpful and aren't always admirable. So loving that character you've been playing is not what we're talking about. We're talking about actually discovering who the self with a capital S is and recognizing, oh, wow, that's who I am. I'm not that character. I'm that. And until you love fully, you don't love in truth. You can try to love. You can pretend to love. You can fake it and hope you'll make it. But until you really see who you are, it's difficult to love yourself. So your new beliefs are a first step towards living in holy relationship. And this is talking about relationship with yourself as well as others, as well as with this moment. But they can't just be in your mind, however. They have to be wholehearted. So we get that wholehearted word again. And when you experience with your heart, I mean, the mind's already really developed. You don't have to worry about developing the mind. It's the heart we need to become aware of in order to become wholehearted. And there's only one place to become aware of and connected with your heart, and that's in the present moment experience. What's it like for you now? How are you responding now? That's the heart. How can they exist And we're talking about these beliefs in the heart of an unlovable self. And verse 8 reminds us, you cannot think your way to the new life that calls to you. It is not a mind function. No thoughts are going to get you there. No matter how skillful those thoughts are, no matter how many reminders you post for yourself, your thoughts aren't going to cut it. You can only get there by being who you are in truth. Again, back to present moment experience. By being who you are. That's how you get there. You might think that if you lived under ideal conditions, you could practice these beliefs. Like if you lived in a monastery or an ashram, or if you lived by yourself, or if you lived in Hawaii, or whatever your circumstances would be that would be ideal. If you didn't have this spouse, if you didn't have those children, if you didn't have that job, then I could live by those maybe. But you're just trying to be good. And while you continue to think of your journey as a call to goodness, you will surely fail. Nobody's asking you to be good. That's not what this is about. So I put in here a reminder of the beliefs, because in this chapter he's referring to the beliefs. Pardon me. So just a reminder, the beliefs. You are already accomplished. Giving and receiving are one. No relationships are special. They're all wonderful, but they're not special. In other words, they're not unique to themselves. Well, they are unique, but they're not better. There's not a hierarchy. There's no loss, but only gain. We only learn in unity. We exist in relationship and unity. And correction and atonement are here. Now, they're available. So these are the beliefs, these all came from the previous treatise. And each chapter he went through, belief by belief. So if one of those doesn't seem right to you, go back and review the chapter on that particular issue and remind yourself of what he's talking about. And he ends this chapter with verse 10. It also was a short chapter. The self that I recognize as you is not other than who you are, but who you are. The ego was simply your idea of who you were. This idea was a complex set of judgments, of good and bad, right and wrong, worthy and unworthy, a list as endless as it was worthless. Realize now the worthlessness of this idea and let it go. So this whole chapter is really about him saying, okay, you have been blaming yourself because your character was flawed according to the world, according to the conditioning you've had. Understand that you are not that character, and you haven't done anything wrong. So it was those particular things that got you here. Yay, celebrate them. Celebrate the fact that you were that. And now we're going to find out who you really are. Ooh, that's exciting. So the representation that you give to the world is one of your true self. We'll catch you in chapter 4.